At Crown Point Realty, we believe in creating a real estate experience for our clients that is second to none. Educating and preparing our clients for what to expect is the best way to ensure we get you started in the right direction. As committed realtors, we are always on the go and always well caffeinated. We decided why not answer your real estate questions over a cup of coffee at some of our favorite spots. This is Coffee with Crown Point. Hey everybody, welcome back to Coffee with Crown Point at episode 19. Matt Farnham here, one of the broker owners of the company. We have Pete Hawley with us today. Thanks for being here, Pete.
Certainly.
Pete is a professional home inspector. I've known Pete for about 14 years, and he's a trooper doing this. He just taught a 3-hour CE class, so to ask him to talk for a little bit longer, we appreciate that, Pete. So thanks for being here. So we're going to talk about home inspections. Of course, it's a big piece of the buying process, and buyers have a lot of questions when it comes to what is a home inspection. And I just want to kind of squash something up front, and we're not going to talk so much with Pete about why get a home inspection. We're going to tell you why of course you should get a home inspection. Be informed about what you're buying. There's no reason why you should not get a home inspection. So we don't want to waste Pete's time or your time talking about that. But I do want to explain one thing real quick. Is one thing that we have quite often people misunderstand is the difference between a home inspection and appraisal. A home inspection is to be an informed buyer. You know what you're buying, the condition of the property, things to expect down the road, things like that. The appraisal is required by the lender to make sure the value supports the purchase price, what they're loaning, the amount of money they're loaning you, and so forth. And then they do care about some things with the condition to make sure the home is safe and habitable, and there's some minimum property standards, which are definitely things that a home inspector would see, but not nearly as detailed as what a home inspection is going to go through. So on that note, Pete, what are typically the things that a home inspector is going to be looking for?
Well, we're going to be looking, the gist of our job in one sentence is basically to produce as much information for the buyer prior to the purchase of the home, prior to the close of escrow, so that they are, like you say, an informed buyer. Okay, we look at pretty much everything, all the functions of the house, the plumbing system, the electrical system, the air conditioning and heating, make sure they're all functioning within manufacturer standards. We're also looking for damage, either intentional or accidental damage that has occurred to the house over the life of the home. And all those things need to be reported so that the buyer knows what he's getting into.
Right. And sometimes you might have an air conditioner that's working fine, but say, hey, it's working fine today, but here's some things I see. You might have an issue a year or 2 years from now.
Correct. And we look at, the manufacturers will supply us with specific guidelines that they want their systems to operate within.
Right.
And we're checking those as a general rule of thumb to make sure it's operating within the manufacturer's guidelines.
Gotcha. Okay. What are some things that maybe you guys aren't typically looking for that a buyer might assume is checked that a lot of home inspectors don't check?
We typically will not check. Some of the major things are like your telephone systems. We don't make sure those operate. We don't make sure cable systems operate. We don't do structural calculations. Those are all left up to either like your TV companies, your phone companies, mm-hmm. or like your structural components will be left up to the city when the house is built. Now, in addition to that, since we don't do structural calculations, we are going to make sure that all the pieces are intact, that none of those have been damaged, like we spoke about earlier.
Okay, and that leads me to just remind everybody that we're talking about a general home inspection here. This is not a specific HVAC inspection or a specific roof inspection or mold inspection where
correct.
You're looking for red flags, reasons if you want to dig further and have an HVAC contractor to the property.
The best comparison I can give you is if you're not feeling well and you're unsure what's wrong with you as a human, as a person, you go to a doctor, mm-hmm. but you don't go to a heart doctor because you don't know what that is. You go to a generalist.
Right. And
that generalist is going to say, okay, this is what your problem is, and you need to go see, a lung specialist or a brain specialist, whatever it is. I'm that general doctor. I'm the guy you go to first to allow me to tell you what direction you need to go to get the answers you need.
I've known you for 14 years, and I could have used that analogy hundreds of times in the last 14 years, and I just heard it for the first time. So that is fresh for you guys, too. That's great. So what are some things that a buyer should expect? What are common things? This is an existing home. It's a resale property. It's not brand new construction. What are some things? Now, of course, you're never going to say, oh, don't worry about this. It's not a big deal. I know an inspector's not going to say those words, But what are some things a buyer should expect that are typically going to come up in these inspections?
The most common things you see is just, I don't like to use the word negligence, but that's kind of what it is. The house is not maintained properly.
Deferred maintenance.
Correct. Like you may have caulking, around the base of a toilet or along baseboards,
Yeah.
or even on a kitchen sink or something like that, which will lead to a water penetration issue. And you want to avoid that, obviously. So you're taking something very minimal that you can repair very inexpensively to prevent other issues. When you have water that sits for long periods of time in enclosed areas, you can have your growth issues, such as we can't say the word mold. We do have growth issues that you want to avoid. We're looking for all the little things that may not seem so little, or may not seem so major, I should say, that could turn into something a little bit more than that. So you find, like I said, your caulking. The other things would be furnace filters, or air conditioning filters. When we do the temperature differential, a dirty filter can sometimes account for why the differential isn't making where it should be.
Right.
So, those little things is what we're looking at more than anything else.
But that's an example of where it might just be a dirty filter, but it might be more.
Correct.
So if that comes up, we realize
But you want to start at the most inexpensive piece first. The furnace filters are cheap. They're, easy to get. So you can do that. And if it still has the issue is compounding, then you can go on to your next line of defense.
Right. And buyers have the opportunity to get all the inspections you want during due diligence at the buyer's expense. And this is an example of where you might get further valuation from things like
Correct.
that. So another question.
Now, one thing real quick, just the home inspector should always be giving the client a direction to go.
Okay.
So they should always be saying, if they know what the issue is, say replace that, whatever it is. That's broken, you need to fix it, you need to replace it.
Right.
But if they don't know what it is, and say the air conditioner is just not operating properly, then you refer them off to the expert to get your specific inspection.
I like that. So not left in the dark.
Correct. They
Cool.
always have a direction to go.
Okay. I like that, and I'm sure everybody watching that would appreciate that. So probably last question for you would be, so when you're looking for a realtor, we've talked about this on Coffee or Crown Point before, but your best buddy who happens to be licensed as a realtor might not be the best qualified person to help you with your real estate needs or sell your home for the most amount of money, or whatever that is. It should be experience, commitment to their craft, all those types of things to make sure you're hiring the best possible realtor. What are things that a home buyer should be taking into account and looking for when hiring a home inspector?
I think, in my opinion, the most important thing you need to look at is what's the experience of the inspector.
Okay.
Anyone can get the license. That's relatively simple. But you want to make sure, since our reports, in one word, our report is an opinion. So our opinion, which is the written report that you're relying on, is based off of our judgment. If we don't have the judgment to be able to create that opinion, or a correct opinion, then it's a loss for you. So the most important thing is the experience and the background of the inspector. Okay, I have a lot of people who call me and ask me for prices, which is fine, but that should not be your primary factor.
Of course.
You should be looking at, what can he do for me, basically. Now,
Value, price. We talked about this.
Right. Price
comes down to value. Any price doesn't matter if it's $100 or
correct.
$2,000. If the value's there, that's what we should be concerned with.
That's true. It's every inspector is a little bit different. If you put two inspectors into the same house, you're going to get essentially the same report, but there will be some differences. So you need to pick the one that best fits your team.
Gotcha. Cool. Makes a lot of sense. Well, Pete, thank you so much for being here. I
My
appreciate
pleasure.
the information. And if you guys have any questions about anything on this, just you can comment if this is on Facebook or wherever you're seeing it. Reach out to our office. We'd be happy to answer questions for you. We can get you in touch with Pete if you ever have very specific questions. But thank you for joining us this week with Coffee or Crown Point, and we will see you again next week. Thanks, guys.
Do you have a question that you'd like to have answered? Feel free to submit a comment below, send us a message, or give us a call, and we will feature it in an upcoming episode.